Welcome to the episode of Ask the Betrayed. I am Sharon,
And I'm Ray.
and we are going to talk about the age-old question.
Are they really sorry or are they just sorry they got caught?
Right. We hear that, I would say, every working day of our lives. That question that is either explicit, as in the clients will say it out loud, or it's implicit. It's that felt sense that can kind of permeate all kinds of other questions that come up in their work.
So, what does it look like when they're really sorry?
Mhm.
James and Sam on Ask the Unfaithful did a podcast about are they really sorry? And I just loved it. And I thought that we needed to talk about it too.
Yeah.
Think that it is just something that is so important throughout the couple's recovery and how to know if there's really remorse and how to perhaps ask for the acknowledgement of that remorse. James and Sam talked about 5 things, and I'm just going to list them real quick. We are going to add to this list, but I thought that it was a great list. So the first thing that they talk about is
Dealing with the betrayal as a problem to be solved.
I thought that was so interesting that that's what they started out with.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to feel like a problem. The betrayed doesn't need to feel like they're being labeled as a problem or that their reactions and responses are a problem. The thing that I loved what James said when he was talking about this is that the unfaithful needs to put their partner first and put their heart into it, not just go to therapy and learn what to say and what not to say, but to have the heart of remorse and want to do whatever it takes to heal what has happened. Now, the boys in Ask the Unfaithful talk about remorse as being something that they want the unfaithful to feel, but regret is something that they say is really a resentment against themselves.
Ooh, I love that.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So, unfaithful, if you're watching this, I think that's such a beautiful distinction. And as a partner, we feel that. We feel if they're being resentful about being caught or being the one that caused the pain versus coming with a pure heart, coming with I made a mistake and I am going to do what I need to do to fix it.
Yeah. And the other differentiation we'll see a lot is the distinction between feeling sorry that this is hurting me so much and feeling sorry that this is hurting you so much and us and our relationship and our family and our life together.
That is so good. We're working with a fellow right now, and his wife is very detached. He's made a lot of commitments and he has not been keeping them. And so she is protecting herself by backing off some. He's doing some daily writings with us, which is something that we offer here at CORE. And I have found that all week, my responses have been to him. We as human beings, and this guy is a man of faith, we don't do the right thing to get the response that we want. We do the right thing because it's the right thing, and that's the way we're supposed to live. And he keeps saying, I am doing what I'm supposed to, and it's never going to be enough. That doesn't spell sorry. He may be very, very sorry, but his feelings of I'm not getting the response that I want are getting in his way of being able to show up in that relationship with pure remorse.
And that's something that came up for me this morning when we were thinking and talking about this topic is the idea that it's one thing to get to sorry and
Mhm.
to be sorry in the short term. It's an entirely different thing altogether to remain sorry, to
Mm.
remain grounded in that remorse. Or does at some point it morph into that resentment toward the partner, the betrayed party, or toward the situation, or like you said, that self resentment that becomes so toxic?
Mm. I remember sometime during our first year of recovery, and James said something, and I responded in sort of a hurt way. And he threw his hands up and he says, "Is this what our life is always going to be like? Is this the way it is always going to be?" And I remember just having this clarity and saying, I don't ever want to hear those words come out of your mouth again to me. This is going to take as long as it takes. I didn't create this. I was not the person who did wrong. And I just remember the impact of my words. I wanted to take action. We talk a lot about taking action, but the action that I wanted to take was the wrong action. So I remained silent after that. But it was one of those pivotal moments where it was so clear to me that he wanted it to be over. And that didn't feel sorry to me.
So, what would you have been looking for to not only see but sense from him instead of that?
Words to the effect of, I can see why you feel that way. Validating someone else's feelings, it's not hard, but it is something that for some reason, the unfaithful that we work with don't have very much practice with. And it's because their own feelings get in the way. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling pain. I'm feeling whatever. And so it's very difficult to stay present for someone else's feelings. But that presence, that ability to be present for someone else's feeling, I think is a real hallmark for you to know if you are seeing genuine remorse.
Yes, yes, I love that. And I actually heard a story yesterday from one of our partners that I thought was so beautiful. She said during previous weekend, she was together with her husband and a group of people, and someone shared a joke with sexual overtones. And she said, I just cringed. I felt my whole body tense up because the message that was inside of her is, I don't like this.
Mhm.
It was just that instinct reactive aversion to the situation. Her husband, who was sitting next to her, reached out and put his hand on hers and gave it a gentle squeeze. And I was thinking about it this morning in terms of how did that translate into remorse? What was the pattern or the sequence of remorse demonstrated there in that scenario? And I thought she didn't have to say anything because he already knew it. He
Mhm.
noticed it and he responded to it. He
Mhm.
took the responsibility and the burden from her of having to even articulate what was happening. And similarly, he didn't have to say, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Sorry I did this. I'm sorry you're feeling this. Sorry we're in this situation in this particular moment because she sensed it.
Yes.
And that story really crystallizes for me what that can look like long term, what the goal might be for couples navigating through all of this is that it's not exclusively that overt or explicit expression of remorse, but it really is that felt sense and that sense of knowing what matters between two parties.
I love that story. I love when the partners that we work with are recovering enough to be thoughtful.
Mm.
So, the second thing they talk about is not understanding betrayal trauma. And I think that that's so huge. If you understand what has happened for your partner, then you can bring a whole different approach and understanding to what's happening. If you bother to want to know what's happening, I think that says, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I think it really fuels your earlier point about validation, and validating emotions isn't difficult. And all of that learning, all of that acquisition of knowledge and exposure and experience translates into empowering that validation and that empathy. Gives you a lot to work with.
One of the places that the unfaithful can learn about betrayal trauma is our companion podcast, Ask the Unfaithful. I think that Sam and James do such a beautiful job of always highlighting what is happening for the betrayed so that the unfaithful can understand it in terms that they can then put it into action.
And you were really the one that taught me years and years ago how critically important it is that when we are addressing issues with the unfaithful partner, that we always keep in mind, not in the back of mind, but front and center, what are the needs of the betrayed partner? And how is that showing up? What happens on the other end of the person who might be sitting right in front of us? And so I really have been so impressed and so inspired by the way James and Sam do that. They shake stuff up and they really take a no nonsense approach to saying, look, you've got to take this seriously, not only because your life depends on it, but because your partner's well being is also very heavily at stake in this.
Isn't that another way that you know if someone is sorry is that they put your well-being in the front of their mind?
And if we flip that script a minute, I think it's also one of the indicators that we don't have to look as hard for, because it tends to be more of an obvious reactive observation. But that sense of this is where we know remorse may not be happening when someone chooses, especially when someone chronically chooses behaviors that are destructive to you, even knowing the trauma that previous violations have caused.
So, putting partner first in everything that you do, thinking about running it through the filter. How is this going to affect my partner? Yesterday, we were doing a consultation for an intensive for a fella, and his wife was in the consultation. And I looked at her and I said, you will be in that room every minute of the time we spend with him. And she kind of looked confused and said, I thought he was the only one coming. And I said, I get to represent you. I know how you're feeling and what has happened to you. And so I will be your voice in every bit of work that we do. It's so important. Going to a therapist who cannot pull in the betrayal trauma piece for the unfaithful isn't going to be very helpful because this is a relationship issue. It's not only a problem that the unfaithful has on whatever scale or spectrum, but it is also a relationship issue. And the betrayal trauma must be in the room.
And I know Jeannie Vitoni, our president for APSATS, often refers to partner trauma informed addiction recovery work. That idea of it is the partner trauma component that we utilize and leverage so critically with care for the unfaithful partner.
We often say, if you are doing the right thing for your betrayed, you are doing the right thing for you, because if you're keeping them safe, you're keeping yourself safe.
Yeah. And do you find pushback on that sometimes?
They do. They do. Oftentimes, they want to hold on to a part of blame. Like, well, if she would just, then I can. And the reality of it is that if that's your thinking, if that's the perception that you're working from, you're not going to ever get anywhere, because we can't change other people. We can't control other people. but we can do what we can do at our best.
That's one of the things I say to our clients a lot is you've got to leave it all on the field. Your relationship may survive and it may not, but you need to be able to lay your head on the pillow at night, even if you end up separated, even if you end up divorced, even if you end up with that long-term remorse over how you showed up in that relationship or how your partner showed up in that relationship. You've got to be able to live with yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah. I remember really not knowing if James and I were going to make it or not, really not knowing if he was going to be healthy enough to join me in the relationship that not only did I desire, but I deserved. And I knew that working on myself and living in my personal integrity, which also meant treating him with respect, was something that was an imperative for me because I needed to know I had done everything that I could at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We often think about how does that translate for the folks that we work with? What does that look like? James and Sam, the third thing that they talk about is not living a transparent life. What got you in the situation that you are unfaithful is that you were living a secret life. You were doing things that were not known to your partner. And so in recovery, your way of making a living amends is to be transparent about your life. This is where I'm going. So my daddy, he had car dealerships all over the area in Tennessee where I grew up. And he would go from dealership to dealership every day. It was just something that he did. And so every time he went from one dealership to another, he would call my mom and he would say, "Hey, I'm just leaving Kingsport and now I'm going to Johnson City." And it wasn't because my mom was hanging on every minute wondering where he was, but it was like this normal course of relationship that said, I want you to know where I am because I know you love me and I want to be in communication with you. That was one of the ways that they connected was for him to say, "Hey, we sold X amount of cars and blah, blah, blah." And so they had this little routine that was so beautiful.
I love that. And I remember the time I was listening to you explain to an unfaithful partner why it's so important that the lock code on your phone is known by your partner. And you said, she should be able to see what's going on at your phone at every time if you don't have anything to hide. And one of the things you said is, maybe I left my phone in the other room. And I'm sitting here, I need to look something up. I can grab James' phone and look. That's part of being in a relationship with each other, having that close proximity and that shared life together. And so much of the wounding that we hear and what we feel as betrayed partners, yes, it's the infidelity. Yes, it's the extra relational sexual experiences, but it's also the compartmentalization. It's the shutting me out. It's the making somebody and something else more important. It's pushing me away so that you can cultivate and maintain this secrecy, this deception, this duplicitousness. And so, like you said, doing the opposite thing, creating the transparency, the access, the accessibility, the consistency. That's really important too. It's one thing to do it some of the time. That does not build trust. Doing it all of the time, proactively, without being asked. That is what
Well,
builds safety, trust, and partner's capacity to believe that remorse is genuine and not just checking the boxes for the sake of getting out of trouble.
yes. Yes, yes, yes. So let's talk about transparency and therapy because I think that's a really important thing for us to address.
Okay.
As a betrayed partner, we want all the information all the time, right? That is something that feels like it's really important. And we want you to have information about what's happening in therapy with your unfaithful, and you don't need to be involved in the nitty gritty. It's really easy to sit back and sort of quarterback what's happening in their therapy if you're getting information out of context. I remember I'd go, "How was your therapy? How was your meeting? How was your blah, blah, blah?" And at some point it switched, and James would say, "Hey, I just went to a meeting and these were my takeaways."
Mm.
And it was just such a relief for me. So sometimes at the end of a session, we'll say, "What are the takeaway you're going to take to your partner so that they can know that you are moving forward?"
Yes, yes. And that's one of my favorite questions for our unfaithful partners is building in a script that says something like, before recovery, this was true, or I used to do things this way. In recovery, I am learning to, and here's how that shows up in my relationship with you.
Mm, that's so great. The fourth one is not doing the work, not having a structured plan. That doesn't say I'm sorry. Saying I'm sorry means keeping your commitments to fixing the problem. Saying I'm sorry means being reliable and predictable. I have therapy on Wednesdays at 4. Your partner knowing that that's a sacred space on your schedule and you are going to meet that commitment. I often think about when we have partners who are constantly having to say, "Has he scheduled something yet? Is she seeing you? What's happening?" So, keeping your commitments. If you say you are going to do something as silly as taking the trash out, then do it, because infidelity is a commitment issue.
Hmm.
I found myself writing to the fellow that I was talking about earlier today saying, "You are looking for her response to make you feel good about what you're doing. So you lean into her, you pour into her. That's how you show her you're sorry. That's how you show her you're changing. And if you don't get the response that you want, it's okay." Because A, if you know enough about betrayal trauma, you're going to understand what's happening. And B, you get to feel empowered by doing what you said you were going to do. You get to feel successful in doing what it is. And at the end of the day, that power and success is that internal change that we want to see.
I remember hearing Dorrit Reichenthal once say, we build self-esteem by doing estimable things. So really that sense of being the person of integrity that we want to be is what nurtures and develops that internal sense of worth and enoughness.
The last thing that Sam and James so beautifully talked about was not making life a living amends. That can be a really daunting statement if you are unfaithful, thinking, "I'm going to have to spend my life making amends." But the reality of it is that if you heal internally enough, then your life changes. And it's living that changed life that is the amends.
What does that look like?
So, in the beginning, we often say to partners when they're struggling with, "Do I stay or do I go?" It's not going to be about what your unfaithful's done. Your decision's not going to be based on their infidelities. Your ability to stay is based on their ability to show up in the relationship differently, to treat you the way that you deserve to be treated, to have the relationship that you've always wanted. And that will be the deciding factor. Is this relationship viable? And is it fulfilling? Is it a relationship of cooperation, of mutuality, of respect, of love and commitment to each other?
I love that so much. This morning, when I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking of it in relation to this three-stage trauma resolution model that we talk about so much, that we teach and learn at APSATS. And we've covered a lot of what happens in stage one and stage two. So in stage one, it's about that safety and stability. It is that transparency. It is that consistency. It is that following a plan, all of those things. In stage two, which is that loss, grief, mourning, contextualization stage, it is learning more capacity for empathy. It's saying, I can't fix this, but I'm also not going to abandon you to feel it all by yourself. So I'm going to feel it with you, and I'm going to support what that looks like in all different ways.
And I'm not going to do things that continue to make you feel that way.
Yes, exactly. It's like you said, the opposite of what got us into this situation to begin with. And then thirdly, in that reconnection stage, this is where I think that living amends piece really makes so much sense and why it is so critical. One of the things that I have witnessed a lot, and frankly, one of the things I have experienced a lot, is when partners get to that point in their betrayal trauma healing journey where the betrayal is no longer the all encompassing part of life. There is a newfound energy and a newfound opportunity to take on new ideas, new dreams, new tasks, new projects, new endeavors. One of the ways I believe unfaithful partners can show their remorse and can offer their repair and amends is to support those dreams. I can't tell you how many times I see panic at worst, low level anxiety at least, in the betraying partner who says, this shift feels new, this shift feels different, this shift feels scary. In some ways, it even feels threatening. Honoring and loving and empowering that opportunity is huge. So if a betrayed partner is wanting to make a career shift, is wanting to go back to school, is wanting to spend more time doing this, that, or the other thing, at best, please be supportive of it.
Mhm.
At worst, please don't sabotage it, because that is a really critical component and one of the things betrayed partners really find valuable as they're seeking to rebuild after infidelity. I just went on a really long monologue.
I loved that monologue and it was perfect. All of this said, we can't jump into the skin of our unfaithful. We can't know everything that's happening inside of them.
Or why it's happening, and whether the motivation for that is altruistic or selfish and deceptive.
I feel like over time, those answers can become clearer.
Yeah. And this brings us to the thing we say over and over. Slow down. You'll
Mhm.
get your best data in small increments over long periods of time.
Yes. Yes. When we were talking about doing this, you mentioned wanting to say that we can't always be 100% sure. And that is true. It is a risk that we take in staying. It's a risk that we take in choosing to be in relationship, in this instance with our unfaithful. But in reality, every relationship that we're in, there is a risk of being hurt. And so at some point, we get to pull out sort of this scale and say, is the sorry that I'm seeing big enough for me to continue?
Mhm. Yes.
Might not be perfect, but is it big enough for me to continue?
And that requires a lot of self honesty, because so many of us are so cultured and so preconditioned to tell ourselves what we think we should say or what we
Mhm.
should believe or what we want to hear or what we want to be true, that really being honest and courageous, maybe is the word I'm looking for, to see the raw truth, the raw, unfiltered, actual, emotionally honest truth takes a lot of courage.
I'm thinking right now about how when partners have lingering doubts about something, lingering doubts about whether there is genuine remorse and a desire to live a different life, or lingering questions about something that happened in their lives together, it makes me think there's something here that is unresolved in some shape or fashion. Oftentimes we think it's about information, but in reality, it's about some sort of understanding that we feel like they're not getting. So you don't understand how when you XYZ hurt me. So I'm going to keep bringing it up until you get it. Or you've told me a story about what happened and I keep coming back to it. We know that over all the time that we've done this, that there's usually something there. So, partners, what I'm saying to you, if there's something that's lingering, if you can get really curious about what's happening for you, what's happening in your body, and slowing down enough to say, what's really happening here? I didn't like what I heard, or I don't feel like I got all the information. And that makes me feel unsafe, vulnerable, worried that we're not going to be okay if this point doesn't get taken. Do that deeper dive so that you can get to the bottom of what's happening for you so that then you have the opportunity to put it on the table.
Yes, yes. One of the things I'll often find myself saying to clients is either you will get your answers to the big questions that are driving the anxiety that you're feeling, or you'll come to a point where the answer is less important, or that you find yourself coming to terms with and accepting what you do know as enough information. And I think I've seen that to be true across the board.
Me too. Although when the anxiety is so high, when everything is so confusing, when everything is just so devastating, it's really hard to hear that information.
And in those moments when that feels impossible, and when the activation and the just kind of raw agony of the anxiety is so present, that's not the moment you have to figure everything out. That's the moment where you find someone to sit with you in the intensity of that moment, someone who can really be there and share that and hold that space with you and for you, and let that be enough, because that is what will help you ground and stabilize enough so that your brain has clearest capacity again for that really deep self-exploration and understanding. Frankly, that then translates into healthy partnership. That is when you can bring and be your best to whatever relationship you're in.
Yes. I think a sign of I'm sorry that might seem obvious, but is really important is have they stopped doing what they were doing? I think we need to say that.
Yeah.
Is the unfaithful still watching porn? They're not sorry. If they are still in contact with that affair partner, they're not sorry. Yesterday, we had a whole day of consults, and one of the women, she was so angry. She was pretty dysregulated. Her anger was such a picture perfect showing of what was happening inside of her, how deeply hurt and betrayed she was. And she kept like mouthing off. And then she would say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And finally, I stepped in and I said, you have every right to be angry. You have every right to feel the way that you are feeling. It's pretty amazing when the unfaithful can say that.
Mm.
He didn't, by the way, but James did. And for you to know that even if you can't get a handle on your feelings, that they are being understood. That is so important. So, unfaithfuls, if you're watching this, really, really lean into that idea that whatever the feelings are, they're not to be argued, they're not to be denied, they're not to be minimized, they're not to be shut down. Feelings are not facts to be debated. I understand. I understand why you're feeling the way that you do. And that, I think, is just such a beautiful way of showing empathy and remorse.
And ultimately, the amends. It's the reparative action that an unfaithful partner can take toward his or her betrayed partner. Said a couple of our conversations ago that the ultimate core human need that we see most frequently is just see me. Please see me, the real me, in all of my messiness, in all of my authenticity. See me. And if we can hear that from our partners, and if we can say that to our partners, that's very connecting. We sometimes see couples who are in the thick of it. The intensity level is so high, the hurt is so high, the fracture is so deep that all they can do is see each other. In those moments, they don't have the right words or they don't have the right actions. There isn't anything that's going to rescue them from that moment. And yet, if they can see each other and be in that moment together, that's powerful.
It is powerful. And I'm going to circle back to the story that you told, that you heard yesterday, about being in an uncomfortable situation and the wife not having to say anything, the husband putting his hand over hers. In that moment, we are together against this.
Yes, that is so powerful. Let the two of you be against the problem or the issue or the challenge or the trigger and not let it come between the two of you.
Yeah. So, on that note, we're going to close this, and I hope that what we have shared has been helpful. If you want to email us, email at askthebetrayed@gmail.com. Know that we're going to read everything that you send. We may not always answer, and we can't do therapy via email. If you like what you see, please give us a thumbs up, share it with people that you might want to. And next week, watch Ask the Unfaithful. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
We do. Bye, everyone.